So while we're doing that, just to sort of frame this, we are holding this COVID Action Committee meeting to come up with a recommendation for the full board on how the library might transition from the implementation of the POP. It was discussed at the last meeting and expressed by several board members a discomfort with moving away from that without some sort of transitional plan or discussion, given the ongoing rates and prevalence of COVID-19, and also in recognition that a long-term approach of how we sort of toggle in and out of that probably needs to be addressed. So I don't know, did I miss anything there from board members that were at the last meeting? We can bring Tim up to speed. Does that sound about right as far as what we're considering today?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, Vanessa, let me just mention that I just got first of all, thank you for that because I wasn't at the last board meeting and have not watched it, so that helps me. Secondly, Maria Buell got the wrong link for this meeting, so I have to log on to my email and send her the right link, and then she should be momentarily with us. So, copy. That was a good suggestion to text her.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so a couple of things that I wanted to propose to the group. One is I wondered if it would be appropriate, given sort of what is the obvious long-term nature of us sort of living and existing in a world with COVID, if we wanted to, and just correct me if policy isn't the right way, that's the word I'm going to use right now, but recommend that, and I don't know what the mechanism or the mechanics of it would be, if the COVID committee would have to make this suggestion to the policy committee and whatever, or if the COVID committee has the ability to recommend a policy, but something that would allow the library director, obviously with clear communication, to implement shifts in COVID-related practices and availability of services at the direction of the library director and in consultation with the board. Because I feel like, you know, absent of having the POP implemented indefinitely, I think we'd like to allow the library to function in our new normal. I don't know exactly what the mechanism for that is, but to me it does seem reasonable to let the library, you know, short of, you know, an instituted state of emergency, which is what got us here, where we would have maybe some more formal protocols, allow the library to respond to current conditions and needs, as opposed to just ending the POP and not having any sort of clear understanding that the availability of services and COVID-related mitigation practices could come and go.
Let me get this straight. The library needs to function without opening and closing constantly, and so what's the mechanism for that? Is it an alteration to the pandemic operations plan to allow for that to happen? Is that am I expressing that correctly? Is that what you were thinking?
I actually hadn't considered opening and closing the library. I was more thinking about, you know, masking, in-person activity, you know, sort of those services that are, and thank you for that, Kathy. I should be more explicit. I was more thinking about the services that are outlined in that chart at the end of the POP. That is the continuation of services chart. So those types of things, that doesn't exactly address, I don't think, opening and closing of the library. I think that is perhaps a different issue. I was thinking smaller scale. So whether or not, you know, masks were encouraged versus required, if we were, you know, limiting, which I think the library has discretion to do anyway in the formulation of programs, limiting participation, you know, the number of participants for programming, or determining if they're going to be in person or virtual. Some of those more fluid things, the opening and closing of the meadow, such as that, because right now they're more tightly dictated by the POP, but what we're running into is a little bit of nuance that I don't think that the POP can respond to long term. But at the last meeting, it seemed like the only option on the table was leave the POP in place or completely remove it. And I am still of the position that I wanted to address it somehow that gave us a little bit of flexibility to responsibly respond to conditions.
Sure.
Actually, what I meant when I said opening and closing, I meant kind of services, not the
Sorry.
library, because I think it my sense it's probably fairly confusing to people to suddenly expect that they can use a study room or they can use a playroom or something like that, and it's suddenly closed. And I think that most things are open now, and to have the library sort of partly closed with no real notice. I think it might just be confusing to the public, so that we might want to have a plan that allows services to resume except in exceptional circumstances. I don't know I don't know exactly how to express that, but I think the library
I think
should have be more open and less subject to closure with no notice of services.
Oh, absolutely with notice. And sorry, it was kind of a convoluted statement that I made, but I did at the beginning, and I don't know how we could strengthen it, but I had assumed clearly communicated shifts in services. I don't know what that would mean, but I agree with you. I wouldn't want to see it one day on, one day off, and be totally confusing. I do think it's reasonable that if you regularly come to the library and, you know, something happens locally that would necessitate the meadow, you know, maybe not being available for the next week or so, there's probably a way to communicate that, but I don't know what others think. Marcia?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First, we can't just get rid of the POP because that was a state mandated document that we put in place. Of course, it was timely because of COVID, but we would have had to do that in any event, number one. Number two, I agree that we should have a policy in place that Tim can use and the staff can use as a guideline with respect to not opening and closing the library per se, because that would mean a whole different dimension to the kinds of things we're trying to articulate and put into a plan now. You know, for instance, the meadow, masks or no masks, rooms opened or closed, other services available or not available, not opening or closing the library, because that's a whole different issue. I do think that Tim needs the flexibility, and obviously he would talk with staff and confer with them, which is his job. I don't think that he should do that in coordination with the entire board, because that makes it cumbersome. I think that what might be workable is that Tim can, based on circumstances and conditions, and we could try to draft something to give him the flexibility regarding what I just talked about, what you talked about, the offering of services. I think he should do that with the president of the board, and the board can be noticed. But I think trying to get the board involved in what might be day-to-day kinds of things in terms of opening and closing is going to make it much too cumbersome for him to be able to act in a timely manner. So I guess my points are as follows. The POP stays. We have to implement a plan to give Tim, and in my view, the president, working together and with staff, the ability to, depending upon the circumstances that we're faced with, to make certain decisions regarding the opening and closing of services in the room. And I think we have to come up with a policy that's flexible for Tim. In answer to your original question, I don't think we have to give this to the policy committee for us to make a recommendation to the board, because that's the COVID committee's job. I think we can work and notify the policy committee, but I think we can make a recommendation to the board directly.
Okay, so then just 2 points of clarification. I completely agree. My suggestion was not in consultation with the full board. I just meant the full board approving this policy. The consultation would be with the board chair.
Yeah.
What I'm still unclear about is we have this POP in place that sort of outlines availability of services on based on local conditions.
Mm-hmm.
The flexibility that we're talking about giving, additional flexibility we're talking about giving Tim for sort of like ongoing, is a departure from that. And what I don't know completely is how we bridge from the POP as it's implemented now to sort of this ongoing sort of policy that gives Tim that flexibility. They would be in conflict with each other. They can't exist at this, they can't be implemented at the same time, because there would be no reason to have the POP if there's override by the director at every step of the way. And so I wasn't on the board when the POP was implemented. Right. So I guess, yes, we filed the plan. What's unclear to me is what is the trigger for sort of taking the POP out of circulation until the next pandemic.
Can I ask a question?
And then substituting that with this flexibility we'd like to give Tim to make decisions, just like Marcia said, in consultation with the staff and the board chair, and notice to the board, I would say. Mike, did you want to comment?
Yeah. So I mean, I think I'm very largely in agreement with the way Vanessa has framed this. And I guess my question would just be, when we look at the POP and we look at the changes in services that are currently kind of formulaically done through the POP, where it says if we get to this level, then these services are curtailed. If all those type of things, the policy changes that we're talking about. Are there really any of those things that, in absent the POP, in normal, just pre-pandemic circumstances, would not have been things that were just within the discretion of Tim and the library administration? Because it seems to me that, I mean, if you're going to cancel certain programs or limit the attendance of certain programs, if you're going to reduce seating in certain areas, if you're going to do any of those things, are just things that are just part of the normal day-to-day library administration that the library, he already has the authority to do, absent the POP kind of specifying what's going to happen. So I mean, I would think of it as maybe we want some sort of resolution from the board that just says that we're if we're no longer going to be following what's laid out in the POP, but there's an expectation that Tim and the library administration will take appropriate actions as as circumstances require to for the safety of the public and the library staff, while keeping the board fully appraised of any changes when they happen. So something like that. If there's any particular things on the POP that that Tim thinks are kind of beyond the normal authority of the library administration, then that's something we should certainly discuss, or maybe we need to talk about giving that authority. But it seems to me, at least on first thought, I don't see why he doesn't already have that power. So that's just my two cents.
I agree with you, Mike. I think the issue was sort of the state requirement of the plan, and then just general emergency response. I mean, that's why it was implemented. I do think most of the things that were done would be at the discretion of the library to do. The difference is, as we've noted in all of our meetings, whenever we talk about this subject, there's a very wide difference of opinion of when to implement those. And so the POP sort of took that out of question and allowed the library to take those steps despite personal perspective and opinion, even of the board per se, right? Even though I know we approved the plan. And I do think some of the measures were more extreme, and we would want sort of the guidance of the POP were there to unfortunately be another pandemic. I think on the end of it, coming out of it, it feels different because we have acclimated to a lot of the procedures and reduced services just throughout. But I think absent that, it could be problematic. So I would be comfortable with citing sort of the removal of the state of emergency, by the governor, and the widespread return of, the widespread practice of returning to some or limiting restrictions that we might, and I don't know the verb here. I don't want to say that we're not getting rid of the POP, but we're just not, what's the opposite of implement? We're moving, we've like, I don't know, whatever that verb is, and would recommend then the adoption of a policy, given the long-term presence of COVID that's anticipated, and then all of the abilities that we talked about, just to be sort of straightforward and clear.
Just to be clear, what we're talking about is moving away, as I understand this conversation, we're moving away from some of the things in the POP that were required under a state of emergency to give more flexibility when needed for Tim, so that the guidelines we set up in terms of where we are on the ground can somehow be mitigated or modified, notwithstanding the POP. Is that a correct statement? I mean, are we all on the same page here?
Yeah, I think that that a lot of the services have not returned, like meeting rooms and that sort of thing, and
Right.
have more people in the library, and I'm not sure that it makes sense under the situation that we find ourselves in, where almost everything seems to be pretty much open. That you say kind of masks strongly recommended, and a lot of people will wear them. But I think people like to get back to a sense of being able to do, to more fully participate in their community, and the library is a big part of that. And I think, as I said before, I think it's confusing to people if you are constantly saying, well, we have to close this because that's what our POP says, and we can't open it until X time.
Right.
And I agree that is not really something that we want to continue to do, and we want to give the administration some discretion in how they implement library procedures. Is that a fair statement of what we're about today?
So you're saying
Yes, I
notwithstanding
think
the POP, correct, Kathy?
What's that?
Notwithstanding the POP. I mean,
Right. I mean, I think the problem seems to be the chart that says,
Right.
If COVID is this, then this. If COVID is that, then
How about this? How about we say we're going to suspend, the implementation of the continuation of services plan with the POP. We're not like, the POP still exists, and we'll follow it in the event of an emergency or another pandemic. What we're doing is suspending the application of that continuation of services plan
See,
in the
that
POP
sounds, that
and,
makes a
and
lot of
adopting
sense.
a policy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really notwithstanding the POP.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my point. I'm trying to zero in on the concept. So the POP stays as it is. And what we're saying is we want to give Tim more flexibility with respect to the services that can be offered to the public, notwithstanding the POP. So that means that one way to do this would leave the POP in place and then recommend, and, the resolution with the board that would say something like, notwithstanding the POP, Tim and the president of the board with notice can make alterations or changes regarding the services offered to the library. I mean, that's not the language I would necessarily use, but that keeps the POP in place, but gives Tim more flexibility. And to not follow the POP exactly as needed. He can implement the changes or the things that are necessary so that the library is more open, given, circumstances that allow that to happen. And, Tim's smart enough to figure out if we have to close the library because situations on the ground have changed, obviously that's a different conversation. But I just want to make sure we're all on the same page regarding the concept.
I
So,
think we're all on the same page as far as the concept goes. I still think that there's maybe a little bit of work and thinking to do around, like you said, the wording of it, I think will be really critical, because what I would like to make sure is clear is that, the board does have the option to return to, that continuation of services formula if needed, right?
Absolutely.
Were there to be another state of emergency or et cetera.
Absolutely.
And so I don't know how to do that succinctly. I am not a lawyer, so I would definitely appreciate some support and proposed language so that we could, I don't know if you recommend circulating that or adding it to the board packet prior to the meeting or presenting it at the meeting. I don't really know what the best practice is.
I'm not sure that we had a long discussion at the meeting, and I'm not sure how productive it was. So I think maybe we should come up with something more definite before we go back to the board with the same issue. That's just.
Oh, no, agreed. I guess my question was to circulate it prior to the meeting or present it at the meeting. I don't know what gets us to our intended outcome, which is productive conversation and vote.
So since we're having this meeting, maybe Vanessa, maybe this is something that comes under the COVID committee report. And I'm not sure if we're gonna have language. I suppose we could try to figure out some language before, I guess we got a week. So maybe we can figure out some proposed language.
Yep. We're about 27 minutes into what is typically an hour meeting. So, I mean, I wonder if we can take 10 minutes now. I guess my question is still, many of the committees will share, language to then be considered and voted on within the board packet. I know that just went out. And I guess I'm asking from your experience on this board, let's just say we came up with some language now or, tonight, tomorrow, whatever. Would it be advisable to share the proposed policy language prior to the meeting or present it at the meeting?
I think either works.
Okay.
I think we.
Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
This is Norina. I'm not sure. I was trying to speak earlier, but I wasn't.
I'm having a hard time hearing you, Marina. Say it again.
Getting out, Marina.
I was just wondering if you can hear me clearly.
Can
No,
you
we
maybe put
can't
it
hear
in the
you.
chat, or did someone hear
Yeah.
her? Because I couldn't
No.
understand
No,
what she
I
asked.
don't
hear
think
her.
any of us can, yeah.
Okay.
So is what we wanted to say, that we're suspending the the chart or the POP as it relates to the current conditions in the library? I mean, is it more of a suspension uh, of the POP? Is that what people are thinking?
Like suspending the implementation or application?
Yeah.
I'm
Sorry, can
hugely
you hear me now?
differential
I'm
right
trying-
here because I feel very out of my element drafting or like suggesting policy language.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I had to drive away from somewhere, but I had poor signal. So can we do maybe a proposed resolution right now?
yeah, that's what I'm working on, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it is hereby resolved that the implementation of the POP is suspended due to the governor's lifting of the state of emergency order and may be further implemented should the state of emergency be re-implemented, I guess? Something like that. Is that what everyone's
Maybe
thinking?
reinstated.
Yeah. And then upon vote of the board, obviously. I don't know that, I mean, do we want it to be automatic or do we want it to be upon a further vote of the board?
I think that the state of emergency is still in effect
Yeah.
until the 15th. Is that anyone else's understanding?
As far as I know, it is,
So
Okay.
it shouldn't be potentially linked to that.
right?
I think that if we're suspending the POP regarding the library, it's it's based on the
How about,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean based on the I guess what you'd say that local local conditions, local I don't want to say, but everything is pretty much open locally, and it hasn't seemed to be affected much by specific levels of COVID. Um, so, I mean, I think other libraries are open. I mean, other things are open.
Do we have to say why? I mean, I think we could just say, resolve, the implementation of the POP is or will be suspended, maybe reinstated in the future. And then that part could have, like, if, conditions, state and local conditions warrant.
I drafted something quickly and we could play with it.
Okay.
It's not inclusive, but it's just the gist of, I think, where we need to be. And so lawyer or not lawyer, I think all of us, can work on this. I just said, I'm not sure that it's necessary to refer to any particular piece of the POP. I mean, this is just rough. Notwithstanding the POP adopted by the board on, I think the latest draft was 3/17/2022, but that's a fact we can fill in. The board resolves that the executive director, in consultation with the president of the board, has the discretion to determine the ordinary services and procedures to be implemented in the library, depending on conditions that exist at the time. In no event shall the library be closed without consultation with the board and the president and notice, or something like that, because we do want to make sure that if conditions worsen and the library does have to be closed, I mean, we need to have an immediate understanding before Tim does that. I don't think Tim would want that responsibility anyway. So I think conceptually, if everyone's comfortable with that, you know, that concept, so I'd appreciate feedback and we could work on it, but I'm not sure that we have to refer to any specific section of the POP.
So I'm not really comfortable with the notwithstanding language, because
Okay.
that suggests to me that the plan is still in effect except as overridden by the library director, where I think the baseline is that the plan is not in effect and it's up to the library director to I think it's just a different baseline. So
Okay, well, the plan has to be in effect because it's all encompassing. It's not designed only to be for COVID. You know, it's a plan that was required. So if you want to not withstand certain sections of it, you know, I have no problem. I'm not tied to this. It was just
But are we
concept.
saying that it's suspended right now? Given that there is no reason for it to be implemented, it should be suspended? Isn't that what we're saying?
But I think we're saying the continuation of services part is suspended. Are there are other parts of it that I think remain?
Yeah, that was, you know, my notwithstanding language, and then to zero in on the services. But if you think we need to discuss certain pieces of the POP, either suspended or overridden, you know, I don't have any issues with that at all.
So we could say that the continuation of services,
Okay,
is
I'm trying to look
suspended.
at the plan.
It's suspended, right? That part is suspended?
But we need to be really careful. I must admit, I haven't gone over this plan, but if that's the piece we're zeroing in on in particular, we could, you know, build this language out. So, you know, this was just a first crack at it, just to make sure that
I don't have it in
conceptually.
front of me, but what does it read like? The continuation of
Yeah,
services?
I'm gonna try to find it.
There's a big chart at the end that says, as I recall, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it says if COVID is X prevalent, then you don't have these services. If it's you know, more prevalent, you don't have other services. I mean, it's a chart, and I think that's probably the type of thing we want to suspend. That we don't want to be, I guess, have this chart dictate everything that we offer at the library.
Right, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's what we're all,
Okay,
I think that is an agreed upon sort of position. It's just the getting at that. And so, you know, I think if the resolution was, you know, outlining that the continuation of services plan outlined in the POP is suspended, but may be reinstated upon, you know, board vote, I think we can keep it pretty simple.
all right, you want me to read the continuation of plan piece to everyone? So
Sure.
we understand what we're talking about. Now, I hope I have the most current, but this is what, as I said, March 17th. It's the last paragraph of the plan. It says, this plan provides for general guidelines on movement between phases of library activity. Library director will move between phases when CDC transmission rates have shifted and remain at the new level for at least 14 consecutive days, parentheses, when relaxing protocols, close parentheses, and immediately or as reasonably possible when increasing protections in response to community conditions, that's in parentheses, staff, board, and public will be notified of such change. That's what it says. So I guess the phases that you're talking about, Kathy, basically is the chart.
Yeah, and currently, I believe we're still high if we haven't slightly dipped to medium or whatever it is. And that's where our issue is. And so we'd like to not be no longer tied to those CDC community transmission rates and find ourselves in a new era of the POP that gives, you know, wide discretion to the library director in consultation with the chair. And so I think that probably makes it easiest then to reference that portion of the POP that we're
Okay.
going to be suspending. And I like suspending because then we can just reinstate it and modify it, you know, in the future if we needed to have that large sort of shift in offerings based on conditions if something new were to emerge. I think that the other comment that was brought up by Kathy about sort of, I think this all comes with the expectation that any discretional changes or changes in services as a result of local conditions that we're giving Tim the ability to do are reasonable, right? And so, I think
Vanessa,
that covers it.
I put just some proposed language in the chat that maybe you can look at and see what you think about that.
You want to read it, Mike?
Can you read it?
It says, resolved that the pandemic resolved that the pandemic continuation of services plan is suspended. The library director, in consultation with library staff and in light of current pandemic conditions and guidance, shall have ongoing authority to take such actions as are necessary to protect the health of the library's staff and patrons, and there's a typo there, including reducing, suspending, or modifying library services. The director shall promptly inform the board of any pandemic-related changes to library services.
That sounds good, Mike. Can you read it again?
Yeah, I had one typo. There's a stray word there,
Well,
but
we can't see the typos.
all right, I'll read it again. Resolved that the pandemic continuation of services plan is suspended. The library director, in consultation with library staff and in light of current pandemic conditions and guidance, shall have ongoing authority to take such actions as are necessary to protect the health of the library's staff and patrons, including reducing, suspending, or modifying library services. The director shall promptly inform the board of any pandemic-related changes to library services.
I like it. My only addition would be, I think, just to be precise, would it be the pandemic operations plan continuation of services?
Right.
Sure. Yeah, that works.
Okay, so there are a number of services that are currently suspended and or not available. I just wondered, it's one thing to stop services, but is that also discretion to resume services?
Yes, because the POP that required their closure is being suspended.
Right.
So I think not in this resolution, I think it would be wise at the meeting following this resolution or before or whatever, to maybe list the services that Tim would be recommending currently be available. Right, so in sort of this process of communicating the shift, we should probably tell people what's available. Barbara?
I just have an addition maybe to Mike's resolution. I would like to add the library director in consultation with library staff and at least the board president.
Right.
I mean, something about there has to be some board involvement.
Yeah, we talked about that. I think we just missed it in this quick quick write-up. I think that's fair.
Yeah, and I also think we need a piece here, you know, should circumstances change for the worse, we should have some mechanism to re-implement the continuation of services plan. So it gives some understanding that, you know, God forbid if things get worse, the board, the president, and the staff can act quickly. I mean, it may be an emergency board meeting, it may be something, because you don't want to have a suspension there if something changes drastically without being able to reverse that.
Well,
right. Wouldn't it be a board vote?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we need that in this resolution because, I mean, the board can always put it back in place just by a board vote. And unless we were going to have something automatic, which I don't think people generally think is a good
No,
idea.
this isn't automatic. I'm
Right.
saying it's automatic. I just think that in the resolution, since in a way, we're taking somewhat of I don't want to use the word cavalier. We're taking a stance as a board that's necessary so that we can have the best possible outcome in terms of opening up the library.
Yeah.
But I do think it's incumbent upon us to indicate that if things change drastically, the board and Tim and staff should all be in agreement that the suspension is no longer in place. I think we need that kind of
I
mechanism.
agree. And
Procedurally,
I
though,
think it might not be procedurally necessary, but I do think that we have to keep in mind that we have residents on both
Exactly.
sides of this and all along the spectrum. And I think it communicates a commitment to return to this if it's needed. So I
Exactly.
understand where you're coming from, Mike, that procedurally we don't need it, but I do think it communicates an assurance to those that might not be happy about this change.
Yeah, exactly. It also
Narina,
gives,
were you trying to get in there?
sorry.
yeah,
I-
well, I mean, I guess procedurally, the Tim and the staff, in consultation with the president, would bring this up to the board, I would think, if it needed to close immediately or there's a substantial shift in the environment where we need to implement it again, and then we could possibly have an emergency meeting with the board to vote on it. I think that's what would normally happen if something changes drastically. But I think the proposed language gives enough discretion. But I'm not opposed to saying something like, in consultation with the president and the staff, the director will bring it to the board's immediate attention should the continuation of services phase plan need to be reinstated or something like that.
Vanessa, can I just make an observation?
Sure, I was just letting Narina finish her
Well, I
thought,
think
but yes, Barb.
I just wanted to share that I think to address Marcia's concern, it does say here, they shall have ongoing authority to take such actions as are necessary to protect the health of the staff and patrons, etc. So I think her concern is covered in Mike's resolution.
Okay.
Yeah, I just meant a general, it could be a very small statement about, the ability to reinstate the plan. And I don't think we have to belabor this. It's a gesture, in my opinion, of goodwill to those who might not be happy that it's going away.
I think the last sentence says the director shall promptly inform the board of any pandemic related changes to library services, and maybe add and the possibility of the need to re-implement the plan or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that would cover it.
Yeah, including reinstating the plan.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that it could be as simple as that.
Yep. Okay.
This is Marcia. I don't see. I agree. I think politically, as well as for the protection of Tim and the board, we need to have something in there that foresees, hopefully not, some major change where the continuation of services has to be re-implemented. I think it's important to have that in there. It can be a simple statement. I agree that Mike's language covers it, but I would be much more comfortable to have a definitive statement in that resolution.
I hear a lot of agreement on this. Do we want to formally vote on this general proposal, or do you want it to be typed up before we do that, or are you all comfortable giving your support? I was going to ask Mike if you could email me what you put in the chat. I'm not on a device that'll allow me to copy it, and then I
can do that.
Yeah, we
Thank
should
you.
probably vote on whether or not you want to have this definitive statement, so Mike has some direction.
Yeah. Okay. So
I can't approve, but I'm in support of the statement.
all in support or favor of the proposed resolution to suspend the implementation of the POP continuation of services plan?
I'm in favor.
Marcia, formally.
Yes, yes, but do we
Maria.
agree that it includes this last piece?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I-
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also am in agreement. And with Marcia, yes, I'd like to see the addition of a sentence that simply says, maybe where Mike has written, including reducing, suspending, or modifying library services, or the re-implementation of the continuation of the full plan, or something
Yeah,
along those
that's
lines.
fine.
So yes,
The re-implementation of the continuation of services plan.
Right.
Sure.
Wait,
I
are we saying that the board director on his own, I mean, not the library director can re-implement the continuation of services plan without any future vote by the board? Because that's would seem to be suggested by adding it at that point after
oh,
we.
okay. So you're saying everybody's in agreement instead to sort of put it at the end where you talk about the boards. Yes, that's fine. I just want to be sure that gets in there somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, because this,
I also want to see it in there, so
Yeah.
Yep.
it will be added.
and this gives the board, the staff, the president, and Tim protection. If we reach that point, it has to be with the full assent of the board.
But I hear Mike's point that you know,
It goes
I
at the
think
end.
we right, but also it goes at the end. But what we're saying is that the board could re-implement the plan. We're not suggesting that Tim would re-implement.
Oh,
it.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Agreed. So once the language is finalized in an email from Mike to Vanessa, would the procedure be to then send it to the full board and say, you know, we met after the packet was sent out, but we intend to ask you to vote on this on June 13th?
I would say yes.
Sorry.
Agreed. I think that's the best way.
Marcia?
Yeah, not to add extra layers to this, but as a courtesy, I think that we should specifically send a copy to the policy committee.
The policy chair is here. But sure.
Well, why not just send it to the full board?
No, no, specifically, of course, it has to go to the full board as part of the
But it
packet.
isn't a policy, it's a resolution.
I know, but it does contain a policy. I mean, I'm just saying as the whole board is going to get it as part of the packet, correct? Or in
So,
addition,
Marcia, I can appreciate that, but we haven't, that would be a departure from everything we've done so far as the COVID committee. Almost everything we've done is the COVID policy, and
I'm
we
not-
haven't done that.
okay, I'm not stuck on it. I'm just saying, if we send it out to the full board, I'm fine with that. I just thought as a courtesy, you might want to, well, you know, Barbara, you're the
For me
chair
to
of the
first send
policy
it to the
committee.
policy committee.
Yeah,
You're
Barbara's the
looking at
chair.
two of the policy committee members
Right.
here, so.
I withdraw my comment.
Three
I
of us.
withdraw my comment.
I
No,
mean,
it's a good comment and I appreciate it. I didn't mean that it wasn't, I just was pointing out that we hadn't done that prior.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And we
with
have
it.
several.
I
Okay.
agree. Yeah, I was,
Vanessa, can I just say something here? Once your committee votes on this after they see Mike's resolution and it's a go, then I see no problem. In fact, it's an advantage if all the board members have a heads up and can see it before the meeting.
yeah,
They're going to be
Yeah,
voting.
that's what we said.
That's
We're
what we
gonna send
said.
it to everybody.
yeah, that's what we
Good.
said. So why don't we?
And we already voted on it, just to be
Yeah.
clear.
So the thing is, we haven't specifically voted on Mike's language. He's going to send it around. So the question is, one, if it wants to go out to the packet, the board, the committee has to approve it. And,
Well, I would prefer us to vote on it now. So is there
yeah,
a way for us
that's my
to?
point.
Okay.
I'm trying to just work on the language for that last sentence that people wanted in here, and then I can read the whole thing again if you want, or.
Yeah, I think we
That
need to
would be
vote on
great.
it now if it needs to get to the board in
Yeah,
time for
just
next
give me,
week's
like,
meeting.
And
one
Mike,
more
thank
minute.
you so much. Thank you so much for drafting it. I appreciate it.
Same.
I'm gonna log off. Thank you for allowing me to participate, and seems like everyone's in agreement. I'm gonna log off now.
Wait, Norina, we might need your, oh, you're not in this committee.
I don't
Oh,
vote. I just wanted to participate, so I
yeah,
appreciate it.
no, okay, I'm just checking because we would have I think
Thank
we
you,
would have
Norina.
needed your vote.
All right.
Bye-bye,
thank
Norina.
you.
All right. Let me, I guess I'll read the whole, should I do the whole thing, or do you want to just hear the last sentence that I've tried to add on here, or?
The whole thing. It's not
Yep.
too long. So.
All right, here's what
And
I've got
can you
right
paste
now.
it in the chat for folks
Sure,
to,
yep.
to
Happy to
follow
do that.
along if they're visual?
I'm just making sure I got everything.
Yep.
All right. Give this a shot. I don't know. I don't know if I got the wording of that last part right, but we'll see what people think of it, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right. Resolved that the Pandemic Operations Plan Continuation of Services Plan is suspended. The library director, in consultation with library staff and the board president, and in light of current pandemic conditions and guidance, shall have ongoing authority to take such actions as are necessary to protect the health of the library's staff and patrons, including reducing, suspending, or modifying library services. The director shall promptly inform the board of any pandemic-related changes to library services. The library board retains the authority to re-implement the continuation of services plan in current or modified form if necessary due to changing pandemic conditions.
Okay. That's perfect. Now, I just took a look at the bylaws. So let's assume, for argument's sake, that sometime in between the meetings, the board meetings, circumstances change and there needs to be a re-implementation of the continuation of services. I hope that doesn't happen, but according to the bylaws, the president can call a special meeting of the board. We don't have to put that in there. I'm just talking about this for the committee's purpose. So if things really went south and we needed to re-implement that, Kathy, you could call a special meeting of the board, or 3 trustees could. I'm just looking at the bylaws. So I think we're covered there, but that's what it would take.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Maria, Tim, how are you all feeling from a library perspective?
Looks good to me.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I think it's very well written.
Thank you,
and
Mike.
Yeah.
Thought out.
Thank
Yeah.
I resolve that we implement the language that Mike has drafted and presented to the board at the next board meeting.
I'll second your resolution.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Well, thank you, everybody. This was very, very productive
Great
and
meeting.
positive.
Thanks, Mike.
So I appreciate everybody's contributions, and a very special thank you to Mike for your support in the language writing.
Right. I will send you an email with the final language that I read there, so you have it, Vanessa.
I appreciate it so much. All right, everybody, have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.